3, 2, 1. I have with me today Mr. J. Baer. I actually have to read this because there's so many things that are... There's a list of attributes for him here. He's an author.
Let's just stop right there.
We don't need to do that. He's a podcaster. He's the president of Convince and Convert. He's a thought leader. He's a tequila drinker. He is hype-free. He's a believer that content is fire and social media is gasoline. Mr. J. Baer, how are you?
I'm fantastic, my friend. How are you, DJ?
I'm quite well. Today was Superhero Day at my kid's school, hence the superhero shirt.
That's fantastic, and I see that Cal is wearing the exact same shirt over your left shoulder, which is pretty fantastic. That is awesome.
Yes, he is. That's a good observation there. He's not wearing that today because it was just in my daughter's classroom, but she has a Superwoman shirt on, or Superman.
But of course,
girl. Right. Good observation. And is that a bear shirt that you have on?
Actually, I can't really. I think it's an it's an elephant. It's
okay.
An elephant.
I didn't know if it was part of the brand, the Baer brand.
I have not gotten to that point where I'm having custom icons created on my polos. But,
so book sales are going well, but not that well. Is that kind of what you're
saying?
Correct.
Correct. I as people have asked me, do you have a fractional jet? I do not have a fractional jet. Nor do I have custom polo shirts.
Okay.
Those are that is the next phase.
Well, hey, that's maybe that's for book 3. I mean, you got to start.
You got to have dreams.
Somewhere.
You got to have dreams.
Well, Jay, I'm excited to have you on today. I don't typically do book reviews, but it's really funny. I read this book. I loved it. We've been friends for a long time. I've been a fan of your first book. I love this book. Obviously, very different on many levels. And as I was going through it, I did the what do they call it? The dog ear on quite a few pages here. So I have a whole...
Thank you for killing the resale value. I appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think once you wrote in it, which actually very kind words you wrote in there as well, that sort of... Well, actually, they maybe up the value because your signature is in here too.
I'm like Johnny Manziel, though. I flooded the market.
Oh, we will talk sports too. Don't you worry. Johnny. What is he thinking, right? I mean, just trying to be a kid, except for he's a Heisman Trophy winner. Can't just be a kid anymore.
And I blame his parents, who come from money. His dad owns a company, and I don't know. It just obviously. I just
feel like kids. You know what? There's no excuse not. I understand people coming from different environments and stuff, but like, it's 2013. Like, you have to know that people are going to be watching you. You have to know that you can't. I mean, look at all the baseball stuff. It still blows my mind that these guys think they can get away with it. But that's. You don't talk about that necessarily although you do have a couple sports references in the book.
A couple. I talked more about that probably in the Now Revolution just because it was more of a social media book,
True. And people are still making a lot of those same mistakes years later. Go figure.
Yeah, because, common sense doesn't have a time-sensitive button, right? I mean, people will be making those mistakes as long as there's Twitter.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I remember Peter Shankman years ago, before I even really knew him, 4 or 5 years ago, talking about, cell phones and cameras on cell phones. He basically said, people have always been getting drunk at company parties and doing dumb things. We just now have the technology to capture it and disperse it within seconds,
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think the converse is really interesting too, right? Where a lot of companies even still are hesitant or reluctant or reticent in some way to fully embrace social media, especially at the employee level. I think most companies have gotten over we should participate at all and at least have some sort of centralized, at company or Facebook page or whatever, that marketing is in control of or what have you. But when it comes down to activating a larger swath of their employees, which we talked about a lot in the Now Revolution, actually, a lot of companies are resistant, and it's because they're afraid, right? They're afraid that their employees will do something stupid, and that fear may be, well placed. But what I always say is that, look, if you listened in to all of your employees' telephone calls routinely, and you read all of your employees' emails routinely, you would freak out.
Yeah.
Because
Isn't there an organization that's doing that right now? Isn't there somebody?
There is. It's called the United States government, but but there's. Your employees are doing all kinds of stupid stuff, and they're saying all kinds of like egregiously awful things to your customers and prospective customers and your business partners. Trust me, that is happening.
Yeah.
You just don't know about it because it's not public and you don't take the time to look.
Right. Well, and I think the other thing is too, there's all these, You have this social fail, the fails that happen every couple of months. I feel like you hear of a new story of somebody, and that's just the one that bubbles up to the top. And so, I mean, that could be a reason people are somewhat hesitant too. But I mean, obviously, you and I are on the same page on that stuff. But I want to get into this book. I'm going to start with some easy questions. The easiest question you'll probably get.
Good.
What is utility?
Utility, DJ, is marketing so useful people would pay for it. Marketing that has so much intrinsic and inherent value that if you said to customers or prospective customers, hey man, would you kick in a couple dollars for this? They'd say, hells yeah, I would kick in a couple dollars for this because it has that much actual value baked right into it.
Love it. Okay. I'm going to actually read a quote in here because I thought this quote...
God, I hope I didn't play
prepared for this, Jay, believe it or not. I have prepared questions, and I have things I want to say. I really liked what you said in here. You said, like an endless game of informational hide and seek, utility consists of popping out from behind a tree to assist when necessary, then fading back into the woods to wait for the next opportunity. And I really like that because I think that tells the story. It's not like you don't have to always be a utility. It's not like your job to just be a utility. It's your job to kind of be there and then step back a little bit, right? Is that...
Yeah, sure, because you even if you're really good at this, which most people aren't, obviously, but even if you are, you're not going to be useful all the time because circumstances change, right? The example I talk about a lot in presentations is the Columbia Sportswear Knot app, which I chronicle in the book, and it's a mobile application that actually shows you how to tie knots. So, if you're camping or something, or the other day I was out on a boat with the kids and they were tubing, and we had to figure out how to tie the inner tube to the back of the boat. I actually used that app. It was massively useful in that context. But right now, where I'm not tying any knots right now, I mean, as far as you know, maybe below where the camera is.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as you know, I don't want to know what's happening. I just want here up, Jay. That's it.
So, the reality is this. It's better off to be massively useful in one context than to be modestly useful in all contexts. And that's sometimes hard for people to get their arms around, but it's absolutely true. You're better off being the single go-to resource for this thing as opposed to being the 18th okay resource about a bunch of different topics.
Well, it's like the Clorox example you give, too, with the stain remover stuff. I mean, to me, that's same kind of thing. It's not like unless you have young kids... Look behind me.
Using it every day.
Yeah, you use it all the time. But for the most part, you use it when you need to remove a stain, right?
I use it all the time when I'm with Tom Webster, who you and I mentioned a moment ago before the show started. True story. I have spilled, I think now 3 drinks on Tom Webster. And not just like a couple of drops. I mean like a full cocktail within like an 11-month span. So does he now
wear black around you when he sees you? Is he just dressed in all black?
Floor-length raincoat. So
talk about paying to see something. I would pay to see Tom Webster in a floor-length.
I have spilled a grand total of 3 cocktails in the last 11 months. All 3 of them through some crazy twist of fate on Tom Webster. So there you go.
It's like he's a drink-spilling magnet. He's
like a sponge. He's like SpongeBob.
Another cool part of the book I really like. The chapter 3 is called "Friend of Mind Awareness," and it sounds funny when I'm reading this out loud to you, but for the benefit of others listening, top of mind awareness is an overripe banana tenuously clinging to relevancy. Frame of mind awareness is an apple worthy of eating, but not enough to sustain you. Luckily, colossal shifts in how, where, and why consumers access information has made a new third marketing method possible. I call this friend of mind awareness. It's predicated on the reality that companies are competing against real people for the attention of other real people. First of all, I love the writing style there too, but there's a lot of stuff baked in there. Tell us more about this friend of mind awareness. I think this is sort of central thesis of the book too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the real challenges for marketing today is that your competition isn't other companies, not initially. Your competition is everything and everybody. So if you look at Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Pinterest or even your email inbox, right, a topic that you know an awful lot about, if you look in there, it's a combination of personal and professional relationships, right? It's messages from friends and messages from loved ones and companies, and it's all mixed in there together. But that's, the sort of modern communication modalities are the only place where that happens. So, I don't buy radio time to make sure you know what I'm doing as a friend, and you're not buying print ads to make sure I know that it's superhero day at school. But yet,
actually, I did. They just couldn't get them ready in time to get them all the way across the country. So it's only localized to this general neighborhood.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. That's right. But in digital, right? In digital, we have to compete against actual people for attention, and so that puts all the balance of power at the consumer level, whether it's unsubscribe or delete or unfriend or whatever. And so consequently, you have to act like a friend in order to win attention the way friends win attention, right? Which is not necessarily about shouting louder or being hype filled. It's about being useful. I mean, our friends are useful. Some of them, at least. Some of them are deadbeats, but work with me. Our friends are useful, and companies have to be useful as well to break through. And that's why that notion of friend of mine awareness is so important.
Love it. Love it. Well, continuing on, I also like when you started to talk about the idea of to kind of stick out. One of the ways is to be disproportionately amazing, interesting, human, wacky, irreverent, or timely. And this is kind of the advice to humanize. And then you say, I've come to realize that while be amazing can work, it's extraordinarily difficult. So talk a little bit more about this idea of just, people always say, well, just be awesome, be amazing, do something unique, go viral. Like, why does that not really work?
Yeah, I mean, there's two reasons I wrote the book. That was one of them, which is a response to that advice. And you hear a lot of consultants and authors and speakers and folks like that talk about that just the secret is to just be amazing. And well, yeah, sure. If you're amazing, then you're going to be good at marketing and business. But the reality is that most of us aren't amazing, and wanting to be amazing and being amazing are not the same thing. Can't be like, you know what, tomorrow we're going to wake up and we're going to be amazing, right? But you would think it's that easy. If I hear one more Zappos case study, like, oh, just be like Zappos. There's one of those companies. Yep. There's one Apple. So to hold those companies up as an example, like go do that, is stupid. It's such bad advice, but people suck it up, right? Like it's Halloween candy.
Well, and it's sort of the same thing too. Of like, the whole idea is that if it was that easy to do, everybody would be as successful as Zappos. Everybody would be Southwest Airlines. Everybody would be, and there's, of course, you can't. You're right. Yeah. There's no way to replicate all that stuff, and it's not just one thing. They do a lot of things really well.
Yeah, there's not even two in that industry, much less anywhere else. So I think that the much better approach is to just be useful, because it's doable, it's repeatable, it's linear, it's largely measurable, and it's actually what people want. I mean, one of the things I talk about in person, it's not in the book because it wasn't done then. There's a really interesting study that Jonah Berger did, and I've interviewed him on Social Pros. He's a Wharton Business School professor and author of the book Contagious, which is a really good book also. And he did a study with his class where they looked at every single New York Times article for 6 months. It's like tens of thousands of articles, I think. And they evaluated the virality of those articles. And they found that articles that were useful, that conveyed some sort of useful information, were shared 30% more than average. And of course they were. People want stuff that's useful. So you can do that as well. And so I just think it's a very doable set of recommendations for companies, and certainly that's the feedback that I've gotten so far about the concept.
So this I'm going a little off my long list here of questions because it just reminded me of something. I know that you introduced me to the folks at Buffer years ago. In fact, in Arizona, I think you and I were at different conferences, even if I remember correctly. You were there probably to something with Buffer. I met the guys there. But I've been following, obviously their technology is fairly straightforward. It's the ability to schedule and share social content, right? For all intents and purposes. I've been really obsessed with their blog lately. I don't know if you read a lot of their blog, but their blog is,
of course I do,
not about sharing content necessarily. It's about being happy, being productive, sleeping more. And the more I learn about them, their whole philosophy is kind of, I guess similar to Zappos in not necessarily customer service, but really about being, happy employees are more productive and you get more sleep and all these things. And it's really, their posts are really dense and detailed and research-based.
Yeah.
And I wonder if is that a form of utility in some ways? I mean, they're
sure.
Like they're providing value that doesn't make you go out and say right away, I need to get Buffer, but it's certainly top of mind. I mean, we're talking about it today.
Yeah, it's a couple things there. One, I'm an investor in that company and an advisor, and so thank you. It's great to hear that. But it was a very conscious decision that they made. I didn't have anything to do with it. Where they had a traditional blog, which was, let's talk about what we do and our product and how to best maximize the effectiveness of our product. And it did fine, as those things do, but it didn't really have any particular traction. And they said, well, what if instead we wrote a blog that would be of interest to our customers, but wasn't necessarily about us? And so I think it is very useful. And I think it's a particularly good example of what I talk about in the book, which is marketing sideways, which is finding a way to transcend the transactional. Of all the things that you could create content about, of all the stories you could tell, of all the utilities you could create, those about your products and services are perhaps the least interesting. Not the most interesting, perhaps the least interesting. So if you can find a way, as Buffer has done, as Columbia did with the Knot app, I mean, they don't sell rope. They're not in the knot business. If you can find a way to create something that is useful in your customers' lives that then ties back to you, that's a great way to introduce your brand to them in a context that is unexpected and perhaps more memorable than the obvious one.
Awesome, yeah.
But it takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of courage to do that as a marketing organization, because you're essentially saying, we're going to intentionally not talk about our products and services. So obviously a small company like Buffer can get away with that easier than big companies do, but we're seeing more and more big companies start to go that direction as well, which is very gratifying.
Yeah. I've really been digging into their content. And as a side note, if you can connect me with either of those guys there, we've been trying to get in touch with them to get them on the Work Talk Show, our podcast.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Piece of cake.
Yeah, just because it's so, everything they talk about is about being productive and getting more sleep and all that stuff. But that's for another day. Okay. I wanted to just talk about this for a second. I know this is really fun. Page 52, it says, in fact, at this point, if you make a bad purchase decision of any kind, from a dicey burrito to a vehicle with unreliable air conditioning, you're just lazy.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big trends that's powering utility in general is that we have access to all this information now. With smartphones and tablets and Wi-Fi and high-speed internet access, this idea of, well, I can't find the answer anymore isn't true. I mean, you can find out any answer almost at any time almost. And, my wife and I were watching a show the other night, and there was an actress on the show. And we're like, what was she in before? And I'm usually pretty good at pegging people like that, but I couldn't remember it. And yeah, so I mean, I have my phone in my hand. So I'm like, clickety-click, IMDb, boom, okay. I answered that question, like no joke, in 8 seconds. And after the show was over, it got me thinking. I said, 10 years ago, in order to answer that question, I would have had to take time off and go to a library and actually go to a library,
crazy. Isn't that
right?
crazy?
And like meet with a reference librarian and all this stuff, right? So now,
or you just would have not cared enough to do that. It's like, it's just
of course,
much work.
And that's exactly and precisely, and that's the point, right? I would have not known. But now there's no friction to knowledge. There's no barrier to learning. And consumers have figured that out. So consumers are hyper-researching everything. So if you decide, well, I don't like this car, well, guess what? You're just lazy, because all the information you need to buy a good car is literally in your back pocket. And people have figured that out and are continuing to figure that out, which is why companies of all types need to double down on the amount of information they provide and the amount of utility that they execute. I mean, I'm getting ready to write a blog post that I think will be a good one. I've been mulling it for a couple of weeks. And the premise is that if you generate phone calls, your marketing is a failure. Because what it means is that you haven't educated people sufficiently. If they need to call you or email you, you haven't done it right, which is the exact opposite of what we used to think.
Right. I mean, it used to be a lot of times a call to action was pick up the phone and call us, because then we can have that. Well, I don't want to go into a lot of this, but you had Marcus Sheridan write the foreword of the book, and I think that's probably the classic example. I can't tell everything of the book, so people can actually go out and buy it, but that's a classic example of providing so much useful content on the blog that, I think the numbers were crazy. People would go through 30 pages or something on their site.
On average, the average customer is 105 pages.
Yeah, that's just
105
insane.
pages on their blog.
I don't even have that many pages on my blog. I don't think.
Well, most of us don't. 105 average, and I use that stat all the time in presentations. I'm like, how many of you think you've got enough information on your website? Every hand goes up. Like, well, let me tell you, 105 on average to research a swimming pool.
This is maybe a little bit, just it's an offshoot of that question. You said, you have no excuse to not have the information, and we're researching more and more. I don't know if you have the actual research behind this. I'm just curious, in general, I feel like there's kind of two sides. I think people, my gut tells me people maybe are researching more and more because it's right at their fingertips. Mm-hmm. But my other gut says people are researching less in some ways because they're asking their friends on Facebook and somebody's responding quickly, and they're actually not doing as much research because maybe another way of being lazy, if you will. It's like, if you tell, now I'm going to trust you. If you tell me, you've been podcasting, well, you tell me. In fact, I think you may have told me about getting this Yeti, and I got it without thinking. Mm-hmm. Is there another side to that where we're not researching because we just have, it's just so quick to get an answer back?
I don't know at that level of granularity. What I do know based on Google's research is that we are needing far more inputs than we used to, more information sources, and that is doubled in a year. But those information sources do include things like social media recommendations, word of mouth recommendations, etc. So from that perspective, I'm using research, as I'm finding information, not necessarily only smartphone research or computer research, but research across the board. But you raise a great point about social, and it's one of the things I talk about a lot now, is that, one of the hard parts about marketing today is that we know social media has an impact on our business, but sometimes it's hard to find it. It's hard to see it.
Yeah.
So, if I make a recommendation to you on Facebook that you should buy a Yeti microphone, and then you go to Best Buy and you buy a Yeti microphone, when they look at their analytics, it's going to show as a direct URL entry conversion or maybe a Google conversion, but it's not going to show.
Attribution gods are like going nuts.
It just makes it really difficult. And so when you run that analysis, you're like, well, what are we doing social media for? That's not driving any revenue. When in fact it is. And in fact, in the social habit research that Tom Webster and myself and Jason Falls-Schaefer did last year, we found that more than 30% of Americans who are in social media have said that social has driven a purchase specifically. And of course it has. No doubt.
Tell us about Tom Webster actually asked this question about the book launching process. You've done 2 of these now. What's the book launching process? How is that different now than it was previously?
Well, I started a lot earlier on this book. I had a much more aggressive marketing plan. I had a lot more sort of levers to pull, and I just had done it. So I sort of knew the way the game is played a little bit better. In fact, I put together an ebook, which I think you may have seen, that kind of goes through that whole process. It's called 25 Secrets, sort of how I marketed a New York Times bestseller. And there's a lot of detail in there, and I've said on a couple other shows like this, the marketing budget for the book was $200,000, right? So that's no joke, right? And a lot of people freak out about that, and I guess rightfully so. But that's what the budget was, and I'm not embarrassed about that, and I'm delighted to tell people that it was. And is that money all going to come back? I don't know. Time will tell. But that's the decision I made, and the pieces that we put into it.
Cool. All right, I'm going to go right into rapid fire. I've got 13 questions, but they're all answer in less than 5 seconds, I think.
I'm ready.
Okay. Number 1, who will win the BCS this year?
I don't want to say Alabama, just out of general principle, and I really don't want to say Ohio State, because if there's any team I like less than Alabama, it's Ohio State. And I don't think Oregon either. Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. There you have it. How will IU hoops look this year?
Well, IU hoops lost a lot of guys. We'll be in the tournament. We have a lot of talent, a lot of young talent. They'll be in the tournament. They'll be like a 9 seed or something.
Okay, you heard it first here. Favorite conference you've ever been to?
Wow. Okay. Ever. The favorite conference I ever went to in terms of a single event was the Marketing Profs Digital Marketing Mixer in Scottsdale, circa 2008, I think. 2008, I believe it was, which is where I met a ton of people that I still consider to be really good friends.
Funny, that
today.
event is one of those that I think in Social Fresh I have more people that I've met at
Yep.
those events.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's the right size. It's the
Yeah.
right size to actually meet people. You get that, that 200 to 400 size event is really, really good for sort of taking the virtual connection and making it actual.
Perfect. Favorite talk ever that you've given?
I think the talk that I had the best response to ever, where people were just going nutso, was my talk about YouTility at InfusionCon this spring.
Awesome. Gmail tabs, panic or let's wait and see.
Oh, wait and see. In fact, we've run the analysis on our own list, and there's been no impact.
I knew you were going to say that. I just wanted to hear it. Your favorite?
But I did delete it. I did delete it out of my own Gmail because it's annoying the crap out of me. So I took it off.
Okay, fair enough. Favorite public speaker? Can be anybody, not necessarily marketing or business. Just favorite public speaker.
Oh man, that's hard. Whew. Who is just really amazing. Favorite, maybe not, but who I have incredible respect for. Dan Thurman, who's out of Atlanta, is an outstanding motivational speaker. And I saw him do a deal a year ago, and he does this incredible 60-minute motivational speech while juggling knives on one of those tall unicycles. And so I saw him, and I'm like, I got to up my game. I need like a monkey, or I need something else in my act.
All right, 4 more questions. Describe Google in 1 word.
Omnipresent.
Favorite social network.
Twitter.
1 app you use every single day.
TripIt.
Will Brian, Kramer, and I land lunch with Ellen?
How many days do you have left?
7.
Oh shit. It's coming right down to it.
And when I publish this,
so.
probably 5 or 4.
I hope so. You guys have put so much work into it, and I really hope that you do. Let me put it this way: with all sincerity, if you don't, I'm going to lose an awful lot of respect for her.
Interesting answer. 2 questions. Favorite city in America?
Bloomington, Indiana.
Good answer. And final question. Compliments of Tom Webster, of course. Start with Tom, end with Tom. How, Mr. J. Baer, do you stay so awesome?
Well, thank you. That awesomeness is certainly a matter of some debate and conjecture. My family would disagree, especially my teenage daughter. You know how they are. But you know what? I try to live the principles of the book, right? Which is just be useful.
Awesome. Jay, thanks so much for your time today. I know you got to go. I love your backdrop. I think you win over mine. But I like it.
Yeah, but you got an awesome kid pictures. Those are fantastic.
Yeah, I'll get some good ones on there. Hey, thanks so much for your time, and love the book, as I said, and I'll post that video video review that never made it on Amazon. They denied me for some reason, so I will also post that.
I know, it's so weird.
And carry on till we see each other again.
Thanks, pal.
Right.
Talk to you soon.
Later.
Yeah, you bet.
Please hang up and try again.